a little bit late, he hoped. So he had another commitment. So we may or may not see.
Okay. All right. And I see that it's recording. So, let me get. All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Oh, there he is.
There's somebody. I think we got everybody. So has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda for today?
Yes.
Any questions, comments?
No questions.
Hey, none. Okay. If there's none, I'm just looking for a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay. So Mark did a first, Randy did a second. So we've got everybody on.
Yes.
Todd, do you want to start the vote?
Sure. Spriggs, aye.
Andy?
Well, he was there. Now he looks like he dropped off. Maybe he had a connection issue.
Okay. Randy?
Meyer, aye.
Mark?
Hauser, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay. So with that, we'll go to the first item, which is the approval for the minutes for the March 2nd meeting. So any questions or comments?
Nope.
I'm here.
None? All right. Well, again, a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we had Todd did a first and Mark did the second. So Randy, do you want to start?
Meyer, aye.
And Todd?
Spriggs, aye.
Mark?
Hauser, aye.
Did Andy jump back on?
Haven't seen him. Maybe could you text him, Nikki, to see if he's having trouble or?
Yeah, I'll
Okay,
get,
Dinsmore, aye. So, okay. So I'm switching between screens here. So new business. We've got, as Nikki takes a second here, and then we'll have her do her webpage update and the UAMPS update for new business.
Mike, I think you
Nikki?
have the agenda from last month up. Do you need me to send you the new one?
Yeah, send me the new one. Wonder how that did that.
We all understand.
All right, well, what's next on the agenda while she's sending that to me?
The net metering policy update.
Okay. Go ahead and start on that.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, I hope. And hopefully everybody see that come up all right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, the main thing, the reason for this update, we're really not changing anything significantly. There are 3 items that we need to update. First, the policy currently has a 1 megawatt or 1,000 kilowatt capacity cap. And due to the high volume of applications we had towards the end of 2020, as well as we found we had a little snafu in our spreadsheet where we keep track of things. Some of the numbers had been entered as text, and so they weren't included in the formula. So make a long story short on that, is we're a little bit over our 1,000 kilowatt cap right now, and so we need to address that. The next item is the title of the policy. Since we're going to be doing some changes in that, I thought it was a good time to look at renaming the policy, because currently it says net metering, and we're really not a true net metering program. We're more of a net billing, and we'll talk about each of these in a little more detail. And then the third one is there was a couple of the paragraphs that I'd received questions from different vendors and different customers on what they mean or how the program was implemented. And so I proposed to change some language in some of those paragraphs just to make it more clear of how the city operates their program. So we'll just go through each of these individually, and if you got questions, let me know. Like I said, the current capacity cap is 1,000. We have about 176 customers with net metering. See, and I keep using that term even though it's not, but we have 176 with solar installations, which is approximately about 1,200 kilowatts of installed capacity. And the purpose of the cap was to give the city pausing points, that if there were any detrimental effects going on or problems with the program, that it would give the city a chance to pause and look at it and evaluate whether they wanted to continue the program or not. So far, we haven't really experienced any negative issues that I'm aware of. And so I'm going to propose that we bump that up to about 2.5 megawatts, which basically doubles what we currently have installed on the system. And then I added a little bit of wording that the city could evaluate that at any time to either increase or decrease that capacity. I should have backed up a little bit with, I believe Nikki sent out both the red line, which is actually green because of what Google Docs does, with the proposed changes, and then also a clean version of what was proposed as well. So you can look at that document and see specifically where all the changes were made. The second item was to change the policy title or name. Again, a true net meter would be like if you used 200 kilowatt hours from the city and you returned 200 kilowatt hours to the city, basically you would be billed for 0 kilowatt hours. What we do is we bill the 200 that's received from the city just like you were on the rate normally, and then the 200 that would come back, we credit you 4 cents a kilowatt hour, and we can talk about that a little bit later. And so it's not a true net metering. There's lots of different programs out there now. And by having that name in the title, a lot of times people, particularly that are in the industry, they automatically assume without reading the policy of how it's billed. And so some other suggestions that I came up with for the title might be net billing policy. Again, the term net, I'm not a super big fan, but that's what's in the red line right now. Others would be renewable resource policy, renewable generation resource policy, distributed generation policy, or grid tied generation policy. And what I want to do tonight is just present these items, have a discussion, and then give you some time to think over the changes, provide any comments or concerns, and then we can look at if I could get those maybe a week, 10 days before our next meeting, we can develop a new and improved red line version and hopefully vote on that at next meeting is my hope. So Any initial questions, thoughts on what might be a little more applicable of what our title? I kind of like the renewable resource policy. Renewable resource is a term that shows up in a couple spots already in the policy, so it doesn't really introduce a new term or language. So
Rick, if we've hit a benchmark to look at it, is there any concerns of raising that?
no, particularly as fast as we're growing. I think we're growing as fast or faster than the solar systems are coming on. So if you were to look at the percentage, we're probably the same, or I would suspect a smaller percentage of the total load than we were when the program was implemented. And again, we haven't experienced any negative effects on the system. They've kind of been pretty widely distributed. So you don't have a big concentration in one neighborhood. That's where you might run into some issues that we'd have to look at in more detail. So there hasn't been any, like I say, real negative problems. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't continue the program or increase that capacity. And again, our peak's about 45 megawatts. So this is roughly, what's that, 5% if it was all 2.5. So we're still pretty low on the overall capacity issue there. Nobody wants to offer a name that they like or come up with a new one, I'm okay with that too.
So it's just
I
primarily
like the
for renewable,
renewables
right?
resource.
Okay. And again, kind of do a little bit of research on your own if you would like, and or send those, and then we can come up with those comments and incorporate them into a new version too. So this one's pretty easy to change. Once we come up with the name, it just shows up all over the place. So it's pretty easy to do a search and replace. And I thought it might be good to just do a quick review. Kind of talked about it already a little bit. So how our policy works and has it been implemented is that the standard rate that you're on, if you're a residential or if you're a commercial, those rates still apply. And so the meter basically is capable of seeing what kilowatt hours get sent from the city to the customer, and then vice versa from the customer to the city. And so everything that we deliver to the customer is billed just with the standard billing rate, like you didn't have a solar system or a renewable system on. So your base charge still applies. For commercial customers, they would still have a kilowatt hour or a KW charge as well, just like their normal rate would be. And then any kilowatt hours delivered from the customer back to the city is credited at 4 cents. And just to give you a reminder or comparison, does that 4 cents make sense? We've got 2 solar projects that will be start taking delivery from in 2022. The first one was Red Mesa, and with including transmission charges, we're just barely over 3 cents. And the steel solar is about 3.8 cents. And UAMPS, and we'll talk about it a little bit, they're looking at some other options and they're in the mid-3 range. So I still feel like 4 cents is a good return, basically the same as a wholesale rate that you can buy solar. Any questions on that? We found this graphic was in the policy 2 versions ago, and I think it just inadvertently got left off of the last version. And actually, graphically, it kind of shows what goes on, I think, pretty well. The curve for a typical home would be much bumpier than what this shows here. It wouldn't be that smooth. You know, if an air conditioner turns on, you're going to see your demand go up for those 10 or 15 minutes it runs, and then it's going to shut off. So when that's happening, the power could go from one direction to the other, you know, on a fairly regular basis. So in reality, this curve through the middle of the day would be probably a little more bumpy than what's shown here. But the basic idea is at night, and if you had really high consumption, the power, which is represented by the red, would be delivered to the customer at our normal rate. The green would be excess that may occur during the day, would go back to the utility, and the orange, I'm going to call it, that's your best bang for the buck, because you're offsetting your own usage at the retail rate. So if you can target your system to focus on your load, that's going to give you the best return on the dollar there. So take a look at that. Again, I plan on, we'll change some of the wording. This is still referencing net metering, but we would include this with the policy as well. And again, picture's worth 1,000 words kind of thing. And then if you look through the text, you'll see that the title's been highlighted. And again, if we change it to something different than the net billing, those changes will come through. But I tried to be very specific, as at least to me, it would make it clear of that exchange of kilowatt hours back and forth and how they're either billed or credited. We are starting, I did add some language. We are starting to see some fairly large systems and some fairly complex systems come through. Board member Spriggs at one time was one of the more complicated systems we had, but since then we've had some others come up with multiple battery systems and generators. And so depending on how complex that gets and the workload, we want to have the option, if we had to have an outside consultant review the plans, we could. And then wanted to clarify how credits from month to month would be handled. I've talked to Carrie at utilities. As long as that credit doesn't get very large, you just credit the next month, but it gives the option, and they could determine between the customer and utilities when that got to, if that got to a certain level, then they could issue them a check if needed. That hasn't been a big issue for us so far, but it could potentially with some of these larger systems. And then there's just some minor kind of wordsmithing changes throughout the document, and then the graphic that I just showed you at the end will be included as well. Some of the other things to maybe consider, think about, and I'm not necessarily advocating on any of these, but at least to be aware, you know, right now we don't have a specific KW maximum size limit. Our limiting factor, the way it reads, is you could put a system on that would produce no more than 120% of your historical maximum kilowatt hour usage. So there's some estimating that would have to be done on that. Again, so far I haven't hit that. You know, they've been under that, but there are some systems around us, like Dixie's limits 25 kilowatts maximum, Rocky Mountain's 25 maximum, Hurricane is 6 kilowatt maximum back to the grid. St. George does not have a limit, and Santa Clara has an 8 kW maximum. So again, I think we're fine with where we're at, unless things dramatically change. Some of the other utilities are doing different base charges for solar. Again, it's something to consider. I don't think we need to make that change right now. I think our program's fairly simple and fairly easy to administer. There are some others that are doing, I think, much more complex things that I understand why they're doing it, but I don't really think we need to go down that path at this point.
Hey, Rick, if we end up buying back power from a private system, don't we get that at a discount over what we would buy it on the market?
Not necessarily. Like I showed. See if I can. What's the back, Steve? On. Oh, here we go. So we're crediting them back at 4 cents. And like I said, the 2 solar projects that we've got coming up, the Red Mesa is about 3 cents that we're buying it at delivered. And Steel Solar is about 3.8. And again, that'll vary by, and on the open market, the last couple of weeks, it's been even down in the 20s. So it'll vary from time of year. So I think the 4 cents is a good overall average that represents what solar's available on the wholesale market.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions at this point?
What's our average price that we're paying if you just put it all together from the different resources?
Oh, our overall blended is probably about 5.5, something like that. And again, you got to keep in mind that a lot of those resources we can dispatch 24/7, and so you gotta, they're not a kilowatt hour from one type of resource is not necessarily the same as one from another. So like our contracts are 24/7, our NEBO can be dispatched, and those kind of things. So
I'm just trying to think of if I'm a private customer, in the residence, do I have any incentive to make a bigger solar system than what my personal needs would warrant? I could see it maybe if you're commercial and you had a large flat roof or something, you could put a bunch of solar panels up, but on a house you can't really do too much.
well, and Todd actually is our one with the most personal experience with that at this point. But again, your most bang for the buck would be to design your system to serve your own load, because then you are offsetting at a higher rate than what you would have paid, which will vary depending on the tier you're in, from 8.5 cents to about 13 cents. So if you're deferring that part that you normally would have used, that'll give you your best return on your dollar.
Yeah, I don't think it'd make a whole lot of sense for residents to try and make money on it. That's not going to happen. It's just more of an offset. I'm
Right.
trying to get my wife talked into letting me get a Tesla so I can replace my gas bill. She hasn't agreed to it so far.
Yeah, and that'll be an interesting thing that will happen, I think, as time goes on, and we'll talk about it a little bit in some of the UAMPs, but you see all these proposals that we're gonna make the electric system carbon free by 2035 is the latest year that's buzzing out there. And we're gonna convert all, you know, a good chunk of the cars and transportation to electric. You know, something has to, if we could charge those cars during the middle of the day when solar's producing, you know, that would be the best, but the worst thing that would happen is everybody comes home and charges their vehicles, turns on their air conditioner in the evening just as the sun goes down, if that makes sense. Because
That's
that
the
would,
idea behind a battery backup in a home, right? So
yeah, you
fill up your
could
battery and then
you could defer or extend the period of time that you're not drawing from the system with the battery, if that makes sense. Because you know, if you have a decent sized air conditioner, you know, most of the batteries, I can't remember how big yours were, Todd, but they're between 7 and 13 kilowatt hours, so that may run your air conditioner for an hour, maybe 2, something like that. And then in the middle of the night, then you might be charging that battery. So it's not as simple as some of the people out there make it sound, to just run everything on the wind and solar. So hopefully that helps. And I think at some point in time, but I don't think we're there yet, you know, I think time of use rates may be a really a reality in order to send price signals to the customers, you know, so they'll pay more when we're paying more and less when we're paying less, and that may change behavior, and it may not. I don't know. It depends on, you know, people's economic ability.
were you alluding to earlier that we could set policy as to the amount or the size of solar systems that customers could make and sell back to the city?
Yes, and that and like I said, there's Dixie and Rocky Mountains maximum on a residential is 25 kilowatts.
Well, what's the mindset behind that? What would be the reason that we'd want to have some type of restriction?
Well, I think the main thing, we've got to make sure it doesn't affect our distribution system, and particularly the secondary system. But 25 kilowatts is roughly 100 amps, which again, it hasn't been an issue for us. And so that's why I'm not really advocating a changing, but I believe that's why some people put limits on. But I'm not sure why. Some of them are pretty small. Ours right now, probably most of them run between 7 to 15. We've had one that had installed some, 2-3 years ago, and then they came back and added even more. And I think they're about 21. And I think that was one of the larger residentials that we have. And just by the panel sizes and the things you have to do to meet code, to get much bigger than that, you're going to have to change a lot of stuff on the front end of your house to meet code. And that becomes pretty costly. And so right now it's kind of, I think been self-correcting, if you will. Just the logistics to go much bigger than, say, the 20 or even 25, it gets pretty difficult to do without upping your service size. That would increase impact fees. And again, there's lots of things that right so far has kind of tempered that. And again, the making the payback more of a wholesale and not being a battery, like a true net metering does, I think helps control that size within a reasonable boundary.
And the city doesn't have any batteries, right? There's no reason to have a battery system for PCAP.
We don't as a city. The one project that we're potentially looking at in New Mexico, it has a 4-hour battery cycle available, but it's really pricey. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And that would effectively allow you to extend the output of that for 4 hours. But right now the batteries, particularly on the grid scale or grid size, is quite costly to do.
And it doesn't make sense to own our own battery system and save up power when it's cheap. And
I don't think at this point, again, there's a lot of capital costs to put into that. But things could change as different requirements are imposed on people. So that's the part that kind of keeps me up at night at different, how do we address our growing needs and with all the different pressures that are on getting resources.
Yeah. I'm just thinking long term, like you said, with all these cars coming online and electric bikes, and seems like electricity seems to be the solution for our power needs moving forward.
Right.
The demand's gonna be pretty big. That's why I'm excited about the modular nuclear.
Right. And in fact, there's even, I think, some places in California that are new homes can't use natural gas. They've went that far. So it forces them to be all electric. And so again, there's lots of things going on in the industry right now to try to stay ahead of.
Thank you.
And again, my purpose here is to, particularly look at the markup version, so you can see where the changes were made. And then we're having Jeremy, as well as our city attorney, and Carrie Wheelwright, our treasurer, that's over the utilities, review it as well for their different perspectives. And I'd like to put all those comments together and present the next version, markup version, that we can look at and hopefully recommend to the council on the next meeting that they can consider. So we really aren't changing the program at all. We're not changing any of the dollar amounts. It's just making it clear and I think a little more straightforward for people to understand. Because there were a couple paragraphs that are a little, I think they're legacy ones that the city started out originally. I'm pretty sure started out as a true net metering, and I think there were just some paragraphs that didn't get tweaked as changes were made to reflect as good as they could have been to what we're implementing now. So that's all I have on that, other than looking for comments. And again, maybe if you could get it, any comments back. I'm just looking at the calendar. Maybe somewhere around because as luck has it, our next meeting will be on May 1st. So maybe by around the 21st of May, if we could get your comments.
June 1st is our next meeting.
Yes.
May. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. We're already past May 1st.
Yeah. I agree. I like the idea of eliminating net from it completely. I think that's just a little more confusing. And renewable resource, I like that. I
Okay.
think that makes sense, but
Greg, do you want
And
my
it,
comments to go to you or to me? I guess either way I can get them to you.
yeah, why don't we send them to Nikki, any comments that you have, and then we'll funnel them all through a common spot there. And so if you want to, and if you prefer, we can send it out in electronic format, and you could redline in that, or just scratch it, hand mark it up and scan it and send it to us, or however you want to get it to us, we can.
anyway, we could just increase my price to 10 cents or something. Just selective people that we like in the county.
Yeah.
I think that's your contract negotiation for mayor is what you got to do that for. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay. If you think of anything, send it in to Nikki and we'll discuss it next meeting and stuff when we talk about those other things. Next on the agenda is operations report and generation update. Rick, go ahead.
Okay. Just give you a quick report kind of on what's been going on in the department the last month. We've got, and we've talked about these before, there's a large new development north of the Washington Parkway. In fact, they're making a presentation to the council, excuse me, and planning commission on Thursday. And so we'll be working with them as they're the beginning part of their planning stages. And so we'll plug in with that and, be able to plan the system that's needed to serve that new load. There's been some initial meetings with the hospital, again on near exit 13. And then the auto mall dealerships are starting to move forward there as well. So a lot of new exciting things there. They're all in a pretty common area, right around exit 13. So some of our projects are to increase capacity to that area. The council approved the tentative budget last week. Again, we talked a little bit last time that there's some projects to improve our 69 switching at the Main Street sub, and several distribution ties, again, to be able to move the capacity that we have at our substations to where the load is growing. Jake and Mike, there's just a couple little things that got to get finished up, but we're pretty much ready that we can ready for the summer run season with the generators. Last Friday, we'd been hovering about 15 megawatts last Friday. When we got up to, what was it, 94 or 5, the load got up to about 25. So again, it doesn't take much temperature change. So we'll be ready to run our units this summer. I'm suspecting we probably won't run them much this month, but in June, there'll probably be some opportunities to do that. The crews have finished the current fiscal year phase, which is the west loop of the Kings Row project. That went really well and turned out nice. Of course, in the end, people drive through there and really probably don't notice much different. And I guess that's a good thing, is if nobody notices us, that's where we should be. The office addition project is complete here at the generation plant. So I'm no longer at the city office. I'm out at the gen plant. So you can see my bookshelf is still empty. I've still got some moving in to do, but working on that slowly as time allows. And then Donna also moved from the city office over to where the IT is across the street there, just west of Main Street. I'm going to share my screen again. Well, that's the wrong one. Let me try that again. Oh, fiddlesticks. Maybe I closed that window and didn't mean to. Hang on one sec. I apologize. I had this all set up, but when I got out of that screen share, it took all the windows I had set up, and so shoot. Nothing too exciting on the pictures is all I was going to show, but we have almost completed one of the other projects. One of the distribution ties that will allow us to feed some of that exit 13 area from our Staley sub. Pretty easy. We had done the overhead part of it about 1.5 years ago, and we just, like I say, they've got some jumpers to finish up, and then that'll be done this year or by the end of this week. Hang on one sec. Wrong month.
Well, I tried to help you, but now everybody knows. Sorry.
Okay, can everybody see that picture?
No, it's just your email that's showing.
Well, I'm just gonna have to bag the screen sharing because I did, like I say, I had it set up and somehow I lost that whole window.
Was it a tab in your browser, Rick?
Well, I had multiple tabs set up
Oh.
in the same browser. So
May have just chose the wrong browser window when you shared.
how about that one? Is that better?
Looks good.
You can see that now?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, this is just the one end of the project. The pole on the left that's cut off, that was the original pole, and that's where the overhead went to underground. And we snaked it up through the Bluffview apartments and then end up on this large steel pole. It's just a little bit east of the RV park that's up there. And that's the other end of it. And that'll give us a tie from, again, to the exit 13 area. To this area. Sorry about that. On the Buena Vista fiber, we have it's called OPGW, stands for optical ground wire, and it's basically a metallic wire that has fiber optic fibers embedded in it. And this went from our Main Street sub down to Buena Vista. It runs along the freeway. You may or may not have seen the crews working on that last week, but they, from start to finish, finished it in less than a week, which was great. And some of the poles that they had to climb. So, and this is on Main Street where they were passing the line across the road and get the 2 buckets close. And the bucket here on the right is one that we, if things go well, we may purchase that in next fiscal year. The company that has it allowed us to use it on this project to kind of give it a test run, and it worked really well. And that's that same bucket, because our current buckets won't reach these tall steel poles, so we either have to borrow it or is what we've done so far. And these pictures are a little interesting. They were doing this work with these hot sticks, and this line is energized at 69 kV. So they were putting these jumpers back on hot, and that's Tyler and Caden in the bucket. And just another one of they like pictures of them climbing, so. Other things projects that's been going on, Jake was able to get the communication terminal unit in our Coral Canyon sub converted to a new Schweitzer piece of equipment, which is much easier to work with. We've talked previous meetings on the rate and impact fee studies. I've had some discussions with UFS, and they're working on some changes. And again, as soon as we get that worked out, some of the final details with them, we'll set up a combined city council power board meeting to go over those. And Mike, this last Friday, Mike and Jeanette and Jake and Wayne held a contractor training. The contractors install most of the new underground on our system, so we need to make sure they're up to speed on our underground standards and requirements. Crews continue to, work on their safety training videos, and Donna presented a meter safety training this last month. Again, we try to keep safety in front of everyone. I don't know if anyone noticed the new banners along Telegraph and Main Street. They were changed out, and we're working with the goal is to have roughly like 4 sets of banners, and over the year's time we'll take one set down and put another one up, so they'll pretty much always be banners up along those 2 roads. Just trying to think. I think I've covered most of the others on that. So any questions on kind of the day-to-day stuff we have going on here? The remaining item is just going over UAMPs.
No questions here.
Okay, so move on to the UAMPs. We had our April meetings in person at a motel where they had a really big room and spread us out. So that was nice to actually get back and see some people in person. They're going to do the same thing at a different motel in Salt Lake in May. I'm going to bring this up. Did everyone get this email? Are you on that email list? Does this look familiar?
Yes.
Yeah, I got that one too.
Okay. And so take a look at those. A lot of what goes on are discussed in the Carbon Free Project. A good chunk of it's an executive session, so sometimes it's hard to know exactly what you can share and what you can't. So we've asked them to send these summaries out so we can provide those to the governing board so they can see what's public information is available. So that was the main point on that, was just to make sure you're getting those from UAMPS. You should have also got a invite, or at least a notice to keep the August 15th to 18th dates open. That's the dates for the UAMPS annual meeting, and that'll be held in Squaw Valley, California, just south of Truckee, which is a member of UAMPS. So if you're able and interested to go to that, let me know, and then we can help make those arrangements. And I think what we've done in the past, certainly board members, the city would take care of those costs. If you want to bring your spouse, you're more than welcome, but those costs you'd have to cover as far as transportation primarily. Of course, the motel would be the same whether it's one or two people there. So let us know if that'll work into your schedule. And I know a few of you were able to attend the last one that we had in person up in Jackson, and it's a good time and good presentations that are helpful there. So again, we don't have much detail beyond the dates and location. UAMPS will be getting that out shortly. Just quickly go over the UAMPS projects. The Central St. George project, the cost allocations for this upcoming year. They do it based on, it's a complicated process. Our part went up about 0.3%, which represents about $12,000. So pretty much stayed the same as last year. And that's out of about over $500,000. So not a huge increase there. We've had our Southwest Technical Task Force meeting the last Thursday of last month. Had a lot of good discussions. We're continuing to work on convincing Rocky Mountain that they need to accelerate some of the improvements to the area. And we're involving their main grid planners in the study process. So that's just an ongoing challenge and process with them. Our Nebo project is running well. That's the plant there in Payson. However, it was about a week that they were restricted by Dominion Energy on the gas to where they weren't able to run. They had some problem with the gas line that feeds the UAMPS plant. So they were planning on running and then had to curtail back because they couldn't supply them the gas. Bale runs well, as that's the one north of here. Its capacity factor for last month was about 60%, with an average cost of about $53 a megawatt hour. And right now we're getting about 600 kilowatts, or about 60% of our peak output capabilities from that. And again, that's just based on how much gas is being compressed. Of course, this time of year isn't a large gas usage. We've hit on the government and public affairs a little bit already in talking about, what might be going on federal legislation with carbon restrictions. Some of the proposals, again, that are out there is to have the electric sector 100% carbon free by 2035 and have a net zero for the overall economy by 2050. And that, personally, I think is a really aggressive goal. There have been some things put out there showing that they've shown goals for, they would, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it is, they would look at where you were in as far as how much of your portfolio was renewable in 2018-19, and then you're supposed to increase it by 5-10% a year to try to get to that 2035 goal. But I haven't seen anything on what the penalty side or how they're going to force that. And so UAMPS is keeping a close eye on that. And some of those proposals on hitting those percentage targets can be as near as 2023, 2024, which is not very far away. The good news is the Biden administration, like the previous two, have been supportive of the small modular reactors. And so that's a positive sign there that they are supportive of helping advance that technology, not only NuScale, but other similar projects that are out there. On the firm power supply project, I touched base. The Red Mesa project is still on schedule, and that's a megawatt of solar to us June of 2022. So not this summer, but next summer. And then the steel solar will be December of 2022, and that's about 1.3 megawatts on that project. We're looking at, because we're growing so fast, we're looking at the different proposals that UAMPS gets, and they vet them and then bring forth ones they think are, merit further consideration. One of them is called the Enchant Project, which this group wants to purchase the existing San Juan power plant, and which is a coal plant, but they want to change it to a carbon carbon capture. I'll use that word. And so UAMPS is evaluating, would that qualify under some of these clean energy standards that are being proposed? I think that's a consideration from that. Right now, they're saying their target price is in the mid 30s, or about 3 cents, which would be really good. And it would be a power purchase agreement, not an ownership. So the San Juan plant historically has had issues, and in fact, it's scheduled to be shut down next year. And so this group wants to come in and buy it, refurbish it, and change its. It still would be a coal plant, but would add the carbon capture feature to it to make it cleaner. And then also near that same area, there's a solar project that I mentioned that actually has battery, battery storage available if wanted. And UAMPS is working on hammering out some of the agreement language with the developer of that project. And we've shown an interest in that at a 2 megawatt level. The Muddy Creek heat recovery project hasn't been a lot of change since last month. Again, our allocation in that was about 1.8 megawatts. And they're working with the landowner and the ORMAT, which is the owner of the technology. It's the same basic idea of what the Vail plant is. And that's been a successful project. So I think this one is worth pursuing. And they're shooting for right now a fall of 2023 for a commercial operation date on that one. And UAMPS indicated that they're evaluating other wind and solar projects in Wyoming and the state of Utah, that as that matures, they'll bring it forth to us to consider. So any questions on those so far? On the pull project, I think there's a lot of apprehension going into this summer because of what happened in February and last summer. We do know the prices, or they're predicting the prices will be fairly high. We have made a summer purchase, 2 megawatts in June and 6 megawatts in July and August. So about a month from now, that first purchase will start to kick in. But we still will have a fairly significant part that we'll be buying on the market, probably in the 15 to 20 megawatt range, depending on what the temperatures and what our load growth has done. CRISP, which is the Colorado River hydro project. It's by far our cheapest resource and one of our smallest resources, but even that has pressure because of the drought. They reported that Lake Powell inflows are expected only to be 45% of normal this spring. And currently Lake Powell is at 36% of capacity, so it's way down. Our wind projects, Horseshoe, its average price for last month was about $65 a megawatt hour, or 6.5 cents. And then we are looking at some of to potentially expand that one. Only a portion, a little over half of the land was populated with the wind farm originally, and so there's space to add more, and so they're working on a study project that we would potentially bring back to pursue there. So they have got approval from the county up there in I think it's Bonneville County in Idaho Falls area, that they can actually, either if they repower the existing turbines or if we put in the new ones for the second phase, they can be taller. And they're looking at 120 meter towers with 77 meter length blades. So they keep getting taller and bigger, but they're able to get a higher capacity factor with those products. Pleasant Valley last month, which is our other wind project, had a capacity factor of 20%, which basically means it was there 1/5 of the time at an average price of about $55 a megawatt hour. And lastly, the carbon-free project, there wasn't as much information as I had hoped at the last meeting. They do have the class 4 estimate back, and they just received it a few days ahead of the meeting, and so they're reviewing that, and we should have the next economic competitive test within the next week or two. With that, one of the areas that they're focusing on is they're working with a company that operates reactors to try to pin down the operational costs a little better, and to get that in the model as well. So I'd hope to have a little more to report on that project, but they're probably 2-3 weeks a little bit slower than they had planned originally on that. But they are moving forward with some of the critical site work, such as the mowing of the site, cultural surveys, and core boring, to be able to keep the project on track overall. And in that, it's probably worth spending just a little time on Sean Hughes. They did a little bio on him, and he's the carbon-free power project director. He has a lot of experience in the nuclear field, and listening to him talk, you can tell he knows what he's doing, and this isn't his first time putting together a project of this size. So take a little time and read that on Mr. Hughes, and I think it'll be worth your time. So and again, UAMPS is focused on the subscription. They're still working with the utility in the state of Washington that did the LOI for 150 megawatts, and then there's several others. Again, I'd hoped that they would have been able to report they had some more signed the LOI, but that hasn't quite happened. They're working with 6 utilities in the Pacific Northwest, 1 in Arizona, 1 in Colorado, and actually a couple IOUs, or investor-owned utilities as well. So that's my UAMPS report unless you got questions.
Thanks, Rick. That sounds great.
Any questions?
Not for me. Lots going on, sounds like.
No questions
Hey,
here.
hey, Rick, in
Uh-huh.
anticipation for the summer, should we be looking at more contracts, knowing that we're going to be using that power rather than being on the market when it may spike on us and really hit us?
That's always an interesting challenge because the market, the product we bought was at $150 for those 6 megawatts. Right now, we felt like that was a reasonable amount to do. We could look for others, but my suspicion is it'll be higher. And Brian Black at UAMPS feels like, and again, it's kind of like the stock market a little bit, that some of the ahead pricing was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to what happened last year, and it's keeping the pricing up. I asked him at the last meeting, I said, are we going to have enough to meet our needs for the summer? And he felt confident that we would at I guess, a reasonable price in today's market. So, like I say, that's the part that we use it for such a short period. It's hard to invest, millions of dollars in more generation like here at the plant. And then you've got these carbon potential issues out there. It's quite a challenge right now to figure out where that right balance is. And no matter what we do, we're going to be wrong. We're either going to be higher, we're going to buy it too high and wish we wouldn't have bought it, or we're going to buy it too low and wish we would have bought more. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, concerns?
I don't have any questions. Thanks, Rick.
And no questions here. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, if that is it, then I guess we just need to, our next meeting is June 1st. Is that right?
Yes, looking at my calendar.
June 1st. So if we have a motion to adjourn,
I'll go ahead and motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
okay, Andy did a first and Mark did a second. Todd, do you want to start us?
Spriggs, aye.
Andy,
Palmer, aye.
Mark,
Hauser, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Yep. Thanks, guys. Yep. See you later.
See ya.
Thank you very much, Rick.
This is my room that I'm used to.